Ethan was wrapping up his day, mentally preparing to head home to his daughter, when Miranda Hale appeared at his desk with a look that brooked no refusal. The office buzzed with end-of-day chatter, phones ringing, and the faint hum of air conditioning, but her presence cut through it all like a sharp knife. "Ethan, I need you in my office, now," she said, her tone urgent but measured. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach, aware that her summons rarely meant casual discussion. As he followed Miranda down the corridor, Ethan's mind raced through possibilities. Was it a client issue, an internal error, or something else entirely? The walls, lined with framed awards and glossy corporate art, seemed to close in, the sleek modernity of the office suddenly imposing. Ethan tried to steady his breathing, reminding himself that he had handled high-pressure situations before, but the weight of the unknown pressed down, a reminder that he could not simply rely on experience alone. Miranda closed the office door behind them, the click echoing ominously. She gestured for Ethan to sit, her eyes sharp and unwavering. "We have a serious problem with the Westfield account," she began, her voice low but firm. "If we don't solve this by tomorrow morning, the entire project could collapse. I need your expertise to fix it." Ethan swallowed hard, the gravity of her words sinking in. The stakes were higher than anything he had anticipated, and the pressure of responsibility surged immediately. Ethan hesitated for a moment, weighing the demands against his personal life. His daughter, Emma, would be waiting for dinner, and bedtime stories would be delayed. Yet the urgency in Miranda's eyes, the sheer intensity of her expectation, left no room for refusal. "I understand," he said finally, his voice steady despite the anxiety bubbling under the surface. "I'll do whatever it takes." Miranda nodded, her expression softening slightly, though the urgency lingered like a shadow in the room. Miranda handed Ethan a thick folder filled with charts, reports, and client communications. "Everything you need is here," she said. "We have little time. I trust you can sort this out efficiently." Ethan flipped through the papers, scanning numbers and projections while formulating a mental plan. His analytical mind kicked in, methodically breaking down the chaos into manageable tasks. Yet, the enormity of the responsibility felt heavier, knowing failure could reflect poorly on both him and Miranda. As he absorbed the details, Ethan noticed subtle cues in Miranda's body language. A slight tightening of her jaw, a lingering glance that suggested both trust and expectation. Her reliance on him was personal as much as professional, a weight that pressed on his conscience. He realized that this task was not just about solving a corporate problem, it was about meeting the expectations of someone who saw potential in him, and failing wasn't an option he could consider. Ethan's mind briefly flicked to home, picturing Emma's bright smile and the dinner waiting for her. The thought sharpened his focus rather than distracted him. He was a father first, yes, but tonight he had to embody a professional decisiveness that could not falter. Balancing urgency, technical skill, and personal ethics, he mentally drafted a plan of action. Every step, every choice would need precision. There was no room for error and no time to second-guess himself. Finally, he looked up from the folder, meeting Miranda's gaze with quiet determination. "I'll start immediately," he said. Her lips curved in a brief, approving smile. "Good. I knew I could count on you," she replied, her tone warm, yet carrying an undercurrent of expectation that hinted there was more at play than professional reliance. Ethan nodded, tucking the folder under his arm. The room hummed with tension and possibility, signaling that this evening would test his limits in ways he had not yet imagined. Ethan settled into his desk chair, the office lights casting a stark glow over scattered papers and glowing monitors. Outside, the city sparkled in contrast to the quiet intensity inside, a world alive with movement while he sat isolated, focused on a single pressing problem. He opened the folder Miranda had handed him, scanning charts, emails, and client reports, mentally prioritizing tasks. Every number, every note mattered, and he knew that missing even one detail could compromise the project. He reached out to key team members via email and phone calls, his voice calm but firm as he coordinated revisions and clarified objectives. Each interaction was precise, efficient, and deliberate, reflecting his determination to tackle the crisis without error. Even as fatigue tugged at his mind and muscles, Ethan forced his focus, compartmentalizing his stress and channeling energy into solutions. The stakes were clear. Success tonight could prevent disaster tomorrow. Miranda appeared quietly in the doorway from time to time, her presence a mix of reassurance and silent scrutiny. She offered occasional advice, her tone measured, never overbearing, but there was something in the way she lingered that made Ethan acutely aware of her attention. He felt the subtle weight of her gaze, noting slight shifts in her expression, a soft nod, a barely perceptible smile, all conveying more than professional concern. Hours passed as Ethan worked methodically, drafting solutions, recalculating figures, and checking every scenario for errors. The hum of the office equipment became a background rhythm to his concentrated efforts, punctuated by the occasional rustle of papers or soft footstep in the corridor. Outside, the city lights dimmed as midnight approached, emphasizing the quiet, almost cinematic intensity of the office and the magnitude of the task at hand. Despite the long hours, Ethan remained meticulous, revisiting strategies and cross-checking numbers. He imagined potential objections from the client and prepared counter-arguments, leaving nothing to chance. Miranda's intermittent check-ins became a subtle motivator. Each word of guidance, each approving glance reinforced his resolve and made him aware of the growing personal layer to her attention. Ethan leaned back for a brief moment, rubbing his eyes and stretching, feeling the tension in his shoulders. The challenge was immense, but he felt a surge of pride in his ability to remain composed and effective under pressure. Miranda approached again, standing silently at the edge of his workspace. The faint scent of her perfume and the softness of her tone contrasted with the rigorous corporate problem, creating an undercurrent of tension Ethan could not ignore. As he resumed work, Ethan reflected on the unusual dynamic forming between them. Miranda's reliance, the intensity of her focus on him, and the subtle shifts in her demeanor made him both cautious and intrigued. He compartmentalized these thoughts, aware that professional boundaries were at stake, yet the awareness of her presence added a complex emotional layer to his task, sharpening his senses and keeping him alert. By the early hours, Ethan finally began to see the solution taking shape. A sense of accomplishment mingled with exhaustion, creating a bittersweet satisfaction. Miranda returned one last time before leaving him to finalize the work, her approving glance lingering slightly longer than necessary. Ethan felt the weight of expectation, respect, and something unspoken. A tension that hinted that professional success tonight might bring consequences beyond the office, and possibly something far more personal. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the final reports on his screen, the culmination of hours of meticulous work. His fingers trembled slightly, not from exhaustion alone, but from the weight of responsibility and the uncertainty of how Miranda would respond. The office was silent, except for the low hum of computers, yet he could feel the tension lingering in the air, as if the room itself waited for her reaction. Miranda entered quietly, closing the door behind her. She approached his desk with a measured step, her eyes scanning the completed work with a sharp, evaluating gaze. "Ethan," she said softly yet firmly, "this is exceptional. You've not only solved the problem, but anticipated every potential obstacle. I didn't expect such precision under pressure." Her tone carried warmth beyond the professional realm, leaving Ethan slightly off balance. He forced a modest smile, nodding. "Thank you, Miranda. I just wanted to make sure everything was thorough." His words sounded small compared to the magnitude of her acknowledgement. There was a weight in her gaze that suggested her admiration extended beyond mere professional respect, and Ethan felt a subtle heat rise in his chest, a mix of pride and unease. Miranda leaned against the edge of his desk, folding her arms, her posture casual but charged with intent. "You have a rare ability to stay calm under pressure," she added, her eyes locking onto his. "It's not just about skill, it's about instinct and judgment. I've noticed and I appreciate it more than I can say." Her words, though professional on the surface, carried an intimacy that made Ethan's pulse quicken. Ethan shifted in his chair, unsure how to respond. Compliments from a boss were expected, but there was something in her tone, in the way she looked at him, that suggested layers he hadn't anticipated. He felt a mix of gratitude, flattery, and cautious wariness, aware that workplace dynamics were delicate and that any misstep could complicate matters. Miranda straightened, her expression softening. "I hope you know that your efforts don't go unnoticed, Ethan. Not just by me, but by everyone who relies on you. You make a difference in ways that are rare in this office." Her words lingered in the quiet space, leaving Ethan reflective. It was more than recognition. It was validation, tinged with personal warmth that he couldn't ignore. He looked up at her, noticing small gestures, an approving nod, the slight tilt of her head, the softness in her eyes that hinted at something unspoken. He tried to maintain composure, reminding himself of professional boundaries, yet her attention created a tension he couldn't dismiss. It was flattering, unnerving, and intriguing all at once, a complexity that left him momentarily speechless. Finally, Miranda smiled faintly, stepping back toward the door. "Well, get some rest, Ethan. You've earned it," she said, but her voice lingered, carrying subtle layers of expectation and curiosity. Ethan exhaled slowly, the quiet office now feeling both victorious and charged with a new energy. He realized that tonight had shifted something beyond work. The acknowledgement of his skill had opened a door to tension, admiration, and possibilities he had not anticipated. Ethan followed Miranda into her private office, the door clicking softly behind them, cutting off the hum of the main floor. The space was smaller, warmer, and lined with shelves of awards and personal photographs, giving it an unexpectedly intimate feel. He reminded himself that this was still a professional setting, yet the atmosphere carried a quiet intensity that made his chest tighten with anticipation. Miranda gestured for him to sit across from her, leaning slightly on the edge of her desk. Her eyes lingered on him, a mix of admiration and scrutiny. "I wanted to go over the project details again," she began, her voice calm, but carrying an undertone that made Ethan acutely aware of her presence. The words were professional, yet the warmth in her tone blurred the line between work and something more personal. As they reviewed the data and next steps, Miranda praised Ethan repeatedly, her compliments flowing easily. "You have an instinct for solutions that I've rarely seen, Ethan," she said, her gaze steady. "It's not just intelligence, it's intuition, dedication, and timing. I admire that." Ethan nodded, careful to maintain composure, but he felt the tension in her words, the unspoken appreciation that reached beyond work. He shifted slightly in his seat, organizing his thoughts as they spoke. The subtle closeness of the space, the intensity in her gaze, and the ease with which she praised him made it hard to focus solely on the project. Ethan's mind raced with reminders of boundaries and professionalism, but each word from Miranda seemed to pull him into a more personal orbit, a gravity he couldn't ignore. Miranda leaned back, crossing her arms casually, her expression softening as she studied him. "You know, Not everyone would have handled this situation with the same calm and clarity. She continued, her voice almost conversational now. Most people would crumble under pressure, but you made it look effortless. I respect that. Ethan felt a subtle warmth in her tone, a tension that hinted at something beyond professional respect. He cleared his throat lightly, forcing his attention back to the project. "Thank you, Miranda. I just wanted to ensure everything was done correctly," he said, carefully balancing gratitude with formality. Yet the way she smiled, the subtle tilt of her head, suggested she appreciated more than his work ethic. It was an unspoken signal, delicate but unmistakable. For a few moments, silence hung in the room, punctuated only by the quiet ticking of a clock. Ethan could feel the shift. The professional conversation had become something more intimate. He remained alert, aware of every gesture, every inflection in her voice, and every lingering glance. Boundaries felt fragile, and he knew navigating this would require both caution and awareness. Finally, Miranda stood and walked toward the window, looking out over the city skyline. She spoke softly, almost to herself, yet with a deliberate glance at Ethan. "I hope you know how much I value your presence here, Ethan. It's rare to find someone who can manage both the pressure and the responsibility so well." Ethan exhaled slowly, a mix of tension, curiosity, and an undeniable awareness of the growing personal undercurrent that had quietly taken root in their professional dynamic. Ethan walked out of Miranda's office, the door closing softly behind him, leaving him alone in the quiet corridor. The weight of her words pressed against his mind, and he felt a mix of pride and unease swirling in his chest. Her praise had been warm, personal, and unexpectedly intense, leaving him questioning the professional boundaries that he had worked so hard to maintain. He leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly, trying to organize his thoughts. Miranda's attention, so carefully measured yet charged with subtle intimacy, had left him conflicted. Part of him was flattered, feeling recognized in a way he hadn't experienced in years, while another part warned him about the risks, misinterpretation, workplace gossip, or a complication he wasn't prepared to handle. Ethan's mind wandered briefly to his daughter Emma, picturing her tucked into bed, the familiar rhythm of her breathing grounding him. He loved her fiercely, and the thought reminded him of the responsibilities waiting at home. Any distraction, emotional or otherwise, could ripple into both his career and personal life, and he needed to tread carefully, balancing admiration with caution. As he walked back toward his desk, Ethan replayed moments from the meeting, analyzing Miranda's expressions and tone. Every compliment, every lingering glance, every subtle shift in her posture seemed loaded with meaning. He felt a tension that went beyond professional acknowledgement, an unspoken curiosity or perhaps even attraction that challenged his usual composure. The office seemed quieter now, almost isolating, as if the late-night glow of city lights through the windows amplified his internal struggle. Ethan took a deep breath, reminding himself that maintaining integrity was paramount. He had solved the crisis and that success was undeniable, yet the personal undercurrent left him unsettled, questioning what was appropriate and what might be a slippery slope. Ethan sat at his desk, trying to focus on remaining tasks, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Miranda. The mixture of gratitude, admiration, and the subtle tension in her demeanor created a complex emotional landscape. He felt both curiosity and caution, aware that any misstep could jeopardize his professional standing, yet unable to ignore the human pull towards someone who clearly valued him. He ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head slightly as he attempted to disentangle his feelings. Professional ethics, personal attraction, and his role as a single father all collided in a tangled web. Ethan recognized the risk of letting emotions interfere with judgment, yet the intensity of Miranda's attention made that separation feel nearly impossible in the quiet of the office. Finally, he exhaled, straightening in his chair and forcing focus on the practical. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, decisions, and responsibilities, both at work and at home. Tonight, though, he allowed himself a brief acknowledgement of the emotional turmoil, a mix of admiration, unease, and intrigue that would accompany him, silently shaping the way he approached both his career and his interactions with Miranda in the days to come. Ethan stepped out of Miranda's office, the soft click of the door behind him amplifying the quiet tension he carried. Her words lingered, unexpectedly warm and personal, clashing with the strict professionalism he had always maintained. He felt a surge of pride for his work, yet unease settled in his chest, a silent reminder that admiration from a boss could complicate everything. As he walked down the corridor, his thoughts swirled with questions about boundaries. Miranda's gaze, her subtle smiles, and the way she lingered near him in conversation had been unusual, intimate even. Ethan tried to separate the professional praise from the personal undertones, but the lines blurred, leaving him conflicted and cautious. He glanced at his phone, imagining Emma waiting for him at home, her small routines grounding him. The thought of her reminded him of his priorities as a single father. Every action, every decision could ripple into both his personal and professional life. He needed clarity, yet the intensity of Miranda's attention made that clarity elusive. Returning to his desk, Ethan replayed the meeting in his mind. Her compliments, while ostensibly professional, had a subtle charge. Each word carried weight, each glance seemed intentional. He felt a twinge of curiosity and nervous excitement, mingled with a careful awareness of the ethical tightrope he was walking. He rubbed his temples, trying to focus on the remaining work. Yet even in the quiet hum of the office, Miranda's presence lingered in his thoughts. He found himself analyzing her tone, her posture, the way she had leaned slightly closer during the discussion, and the almost imperceptible softness in her voice that hinted at something more than professional gratitude. Ethan exhaled slowly, acknowledging the internal conflict. Admiration, appreciation, and subtle attraction battled inside him, creating a tension that made him question every instinct. The challenge wasn't just solving problems at work, it was navigating the unspoken, emotionally charged dynamics that had suddenly complicated his otherwise structured professional life. He sat back, letting the moment settle, and reminded himself that discretion and composure were crucial. Gossip, misunderstandings, or missteps could have lasting consequences. Yet, he couldn't deny the magnetic pull of Miranda's attention, a force that drew both intrigue and caution in equal measure. Finally, Ethan focused on the tasks ahead, determined to compartmentalize his feelings. The evening had shifted something fundamental. Beyond work, beyond expectations, beyond ordinary admiration. Mixed emotions lingered, a quiet storm within him, hinting that the balance between professional integrity and personal tension would be tested in the days to come. Sophie leaned against the edge of her desk, discreetly observing Ethan as he returned from Miranda's office. She had noticed the subtle changes in his demeanor, the way his eyes lingered after Miranda spoke, and the slight tension in his posture that hadn't been there before. Office dynamics were always delicate, but something about tonight felt charged, a quiet storm beneath the polished professionalism. Sophie's curiosity mingled with concern, knowing that even the slightest misstep could ignite gossip and complications. From her vantage point, Sophie watched Miranda approach Ethan with that familiar intensity, her voice soft, yet carrying a weight that drew his full attention. It was in the small gestures, the tilt of her head, the lingering glance, the warmth in her tone, that Sophie detected the unusual dynamic forming. She felt a mix of intrigue and apprehension. She understood that workplace boundaries were being tested, and the consequences could ripple far beyond this evening. Ethan, for his part, was unaware of the depth of Sophie's observation. He was fully absorbed in his internal struggle, juggling pride in his accomplishments with discomfort at Miranda's subtle attentions. Every compliment, every approving nod, and every fleeting moment of intimacy in Miranda's behavior pressed on his consciousness. The weight of observation added another layer of pressure, making him more self-aware. Cautious and reflective about every interaction, Sophie scribbled a few notes to herself, a habit she used to process social dynamics at work. She considered how others might perceive the situation, the potential rumors that could spread, and the ethical implications of personal interest intersecting with professional authority. The tension in the office, usually a background hum, now felt almost palpable, a living entity shaped by unspoken desires and hidden scrutiny. As the night wore on, Sophie noticed Ethan's subtle reactions, hesitation in his movements, the careful selection of words, and the occasional glance toward Miranda that suggested both awareness and restraint. It was a delicate dance, and Sophie understood the stakes better than anyone. The wrong step could compromise careers, reputations, and personal integrity. She felt both sympathy and fascination, a witness to an intricate and potentially volatile human drama unfolding in real time. Miranda, too, seemed aware of Sophie's presence without acknowledging it. She maintained her composure, projecting professionalism while subtly intensifying the tension with Ethan. Sophie sensed the undercurrent of power in the room, the way Miranda's attention could influence not just Ethan's work, but his emotional state. The balance of authority and attraction created a charged environment that heightened Sophie's awareness and curiosity simultaneously. Ethan finally returned to his desk, attempting to focus on remaining tasks. But the knowledge, however vague, that someone was observing him added unease. He adjusted his posture, straightened papers, and consciously measured his tone when speaking aloud to himself or over the phone. Sophie, still watching, noted the slight stiffness in his shoulders, the tension in his jaw, and the way he occasionally glanced toward Miranda's office, creating an invisible triangle of attention, emotion, and scrutiny. By the end of the night, Sophie leaned back, reflecting on the complexities she had witnessed. The subtle interplay of admiration, tension, and unspoken attraction created a delicate web that she realized could unravel at any moment. Ethan's awareness of observation, coupled with Miranda's precise control over their interactions, made the office feel simultaneously intimate and precarious. Sophie's perspective added a silent pressure to every decision Ethan would make, heightening the drama and stakes of what had started as a routine evening at the office. Ethan received the first invitation subtly, an email from Miranda suggesting they discuss the Westfield account over lunch. The tone was professional, yet the choice of a quiet, upscale restaurant and her casual suggestion to share a meal felt unusually personal. Ethan paused, considering the implications. He wanted to maintain professionalism, yet the warmth in her invitation carried a tension he couldn't ignore. He accepted, framing it as a work meeting, but the butterflies in his stomach betrayed him. Lunch arrived, and Miranda's attention seemed to hover just slightly closer than expected. She asked about his life outside the office, showing interest in stories about his daughter, Emma, and his weekend routines. Ethan felt flattered, but remained cautious, aware that this attention straddled a line that could easily blur. After lunch, she suggested a brief walk to discuss further details. The city streets were bustling, but the space between them felt intimate, almost private. Miranda's tone was lighter than in the office, her gestures open and friendly, yet each word and glance carried a subtle charge. Ethan struggled to maintain boundaries, carefully steering the conversation back to the project while acknowledging her personal curiosity. Back at the office, Miranda proposed another one-on-one session, this time after hours, to finalize reports. Ethan hesitated, aware that staying late could compromise his personal life, yet the trust she placed in him made it hard to refuse. He sensed that each invitation carried a dual purpose: work efficiency and personal attention, a mix he was unsure how to navigate without causing misunderstanding. The dynamic created a tension that Ethan hadn't encountered before. Miranda's compliments lingered longer than usual, her proximity seemed intentional, and her eyes often held his a fraction longer than necessary. He noticed the subtle shift in tone, the flirtatious undercurrent in her professional demeanor. Maintaining composure required effort, as every interaction became a careful dance of etiquette, attraction, and self-restraint. Ethan found himself reflecting on his own responses, measuring his reactions to avoid giving misleading signals. He enjoyed her company, appreciated her recognition, yet remained keenly aware of the professional implications. Each meeting, lunch, or after-work discussion felt like a balancing act, where one misstep could alter the entire dynamic irreversibly. Despite the careful dance, Ethan felt a growing curiosity and tension that was difficult to suppress. Miranda's presence was magnetic, her attention flattering, and yet he reminded himself constantly that professionalism and personal boundaries were paramount. The complexity of the situation created a quiet anxiety, tempered by an undeniable intrigue that he couldn't dismiss. By the end of the week, Ethan realized the subtle invitations had shifted the rhythm of his work life. He navigated a space that was part admiration, part expectation, and part personal tension. The boundaries were unclear, yet the attraction and attention were undeniable, leaving him aware that the next step, whether professional or personal, would require careful thought and precise judgment. Ethan sat at his desk, the glow of his monitor illuminating a face taut with concentration and subtle unease. Miranda had just left after another one-on-one session, her presence still lingering in the air like a faint perfume. Each gesture, each softly delivered compliment, replayed in his mind. The magnetic pull of her charm created a tension that was difficult to ignore, a silent force that both intrigued and unsettled him. He tried to focus on reports and projections, typing methodically, but every glance toward the door betrayed his mind's wandering. Miranda's subtle nods, the way she paused slightly when entering the room, and the softness in her tone seemed designed to pull him in. Ethan recognized the danger of letting attraction interfere with his work, yet the emotional draw was undeniable, making every decision feel heavier, charged with silent consequences. During a brief meeting with his team, Ethan noticed Miranda watching from across the room, her eyes finding his with a glance that lingered longer than necessary. The weight of that observation created a quiet anxiety, mixing with the undeniable thrill of attention. He reminded himself that professionalism had to come first, but the private acknowledgements, the subtle teasing in her tone, tested his ability to maintain composure in front of others. Even routine interactions became fraught with complexity. A simple question about a spreadsheet or an update on a project carried layers of implication when Miranda was involved. Her smiles were warm, but they held subtle hints of personal curiosity, and her body language suggested an awareness of the effect she had on him. Ethan found himself recalibrating every response, every gesture, balancing honesty with caution. After hours, when the office was quiet and only city lights flickered through the windows, Miranda returned to discuss final adjustments. The atmosphere was charged, intimate despite its professional veneer. She stood close enough for the subtle scent of her perfume to reach him, and her casual touch on a folder as she handed it over sparked a tension Ethan struggled to suppress. He felt pulled between desire, caution, and responsibility. Ethan's mind raced with internal debate. He admired Miranda's confidence and brilliance, But he also understood the stakes. Crossing boundaries could jeopardize not only his career, but the delicate trust he had built as a reliable, single father balancing home and work. Yet with each glance and each word, the emotional temptation grew, a quiet force that challenged every principle he had set for himself. Despite the tension, Ethan maintained focus, compartmentalizing his thoughts to protect both his professional integrity and personal composure. He analyzed strategies, cross-checked numbers, and mentally rehearsed conversations to ensure nothing blurred the line in front of colleagues or in future one-on-one interactions. Every movement was measured, deliberate, yet the underlying charge of attraction created an almost electric energy in the otherwise quiet office. By the end of the evening, Ethan realized the stakes were higher than ever. The pull of temptation, coupled with the weight of responsibility, demanded vigilance, emotional intelligence, and restraint. Miranda's charm, subtle yet undeniable, had woven a layer of complexity into his professional life. He knew that navigating these feelings would require careful judgment, and that the choices he made in the coming days could reshape both his career and the intricate personal connection forming between them. Miranda invited Ethan into her office one late afternoon, the golden light from the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. Her tone was softer than usual, but the intensity in her gaze left no room for misunderstanding. "Ethan," she began, pausing, as if weighing each word, "I want you to know how much I admire the way you handle pressure, and not just in work matters." The subtle shift in her voice carried layers of personal attention that Ethan couldn't ignore. Ethan felt a jolt of awareness, his mind racing to parse the meaning behind her words. Admiration and desire mingled in Miranda's tone, and for the first time, he confronted the reality that their connection was moving beyond professional bounds. Every instinct told him to maintain composure, yet the clarity of her attention forced him to face emotions he had been quietly navigating for weeks. He ran a hand through his hair, grounding himself in the principles he had always upheld: integrity, professionalism, and the responsibility of being a single father. Miranda's confession, though subtle, introduced a moral complexity he hadn't anticipated. Crossing this line could jeopardize not only his career, but the delicate equilibrium he maintained between work and home, between ambition and ethics. Ethan's heart raced as he measured the consequences of any reaction. He admired her brilliance and felt a natural attraction, yet he was painfully aware of workplace norms and the potential fallout of giving in to temptation. His mind wrestled with 1,000 questions. Could he reciprocate without endangering himself? Was it possible to navigate a personal connection while preserving professional respect and trust? Finally, he looked Miranda in the eye, a mix of determination and vulnerability in his gaze. "I value your admiration," he said carefully, "but I need to be mindful of boundaries, for both of us." The moment was charged, a delicate balance of honesty and restraint. He felt the emotional weight of their unspoken tension, realizing that clarity had not simplified their connection. It had deepened it, leaving him aware that the next steps required both caution and courage. Ethan sat at his desk, the office quiet now that the evening had settled in. The events of the past weeks played over in his mind, a mix of admiration, tension, and temptation he could no longer ignore. He thought carefully about Miranda's attention, the subtle invitations, and the confession that had clarified her intentions. Each moment had tested his ability to balance desire with professional integrity, and he knew a decision was required. He reflected on his responsibilities as a single father, thinking of Emma and the example he wanted to set. Integrity had always guided him, and crossing boundaries could have far-reaching consequences for both his career and personal life. Yet the emotional pull toward Miranda was undeniable, a force that demanded acknowledgement. Ethan understood that navigating this would require honesty, caution, and self-awareness rather than impulsive reaction. After long consideration, Ethan resolved to maintain professional boundaries while cautiously allowing for a personal connection outside the immediate pressures of work. He would respect ethical lines, ensuring that admiration or attraction did not compromise judgment or workplace dynamics. At the same time, he acknowledged the possibility of exploring a connection under clear, intentional circumstances where trust and communication would be paramount. He pictured Miranda, her sharp intelligence and subtle charm, lingering in his thoughts. The challenge was not to suppress attraction, but to channel it responsibly. Ethan realized that personal growth often stemmed from managing complex emotions rather than yielding to them blindly. He valued his professional reputation and the stability he had built, recognizing that discipline and reflection were as important as desire. The resolution brought a sense of empowerment, a quiet confidence that he could navigate both work and personal challenges with integrity. Ethan knew that temptation and opportunity would continue to present themselves, but he felt prepared to act with intention rather than impulse. Every choice he made, moving forward, would be deliberate, shaped by his values and the lessons learned from the delicate balance he had maintained. He considered the subtle tension that had defined recent interactions with Miranda. Rather than fearing it or avoiding it, Ethan now viewed it as a space for measured understanding. He would engage thoughtfully, preserving professionalism while respecting personal feelings, creating a dynamic where honesty, consent, and mutual respect guided every step. As he prepared to leave the office, Ethan allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The path ahead was uncertain, but he felt grounded in his principles. He had navigated admiration, desire, and professional expectations without losing himself or compromising the trust of others. The emotional landscape remained complex, yet he felt capable of managing it with awareness, patience, and discernment. Finally, stepping into the night air, Ethan embraced the duality of his life: single father, dedicated professional, and a man capable of recognizing human attraction without sacrificing integrity. He felt a quiet optimism, knowing that his choices had preserved both his career and his personal growth. The tension remained, but it was tempered with clarity, empowering him to face the future with confidence, responsibility, and an openness to the possibilities that lay ahead.